You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
We are on 13 now.
Lucky 13.
It's exciting.
Woohoo.
I like 1 and 3. It's a good number.
We're a teenager.
Yeah, we are. That's funny. But yeah, gotten pretty steady so far. We've, as far as everything that's been going on with like downloads and stuff, we've gotten some pretty interesting lists, like
Places.
Like, hi, Germany.
Hi. I don't speak German, so I'm sorry.
I don't. Have you seen those TikToks where the people will talk like about one word in, like, they'll talk about one specific word, like hospital, and how all these other like countries say the word hospital, and it's like hospital and all these other things, and then it always goes to Germany, and Germany's like Krankenhaus. And everything else is like, it all sounds like hospital. Like you would know what it is. And Germany's is like so harsh.
But Germany, we still like you.
We do. I love it. But there's like there's series on TikTok of people that are like using these words and then going to the German word for it. And it's really funny. So we also have, let's see.
Didn't you say Uruguay?
Yeah, we do. We did Montevideo, and then some more in the UK. We've got like a pretty good fan base in the UK. So hi, guys.
Hi.
And our neighbors to the north. They're always hanging in there. The Canadians.
Oh, Canada. I think that's right. If it's not, I apologize.
I think it is. But who knows?
I think so.
So this week we are in 1811, and let's get into it. We'll kind of go over what the topic is in a bit. So, sources for this week, one of them is an article by Dale M. Brumfield. I got a lot of information from this article, and it's called Murder Among the Earthquakes.
Among the earthquakes?
Yes. Earthquakes.
Okay, then.
It's very interesting. And that was on medium.com. But it was a really good article. So I really used that one. It was very, very long. It was one of those like a mental floss article that's like never ends. It was kind of one of those, but it was very, very good. The New York Times had an article that was actually from 1976.
Before I was born. Just throwing that out there for you.
And then this was kind of like a series of essays, I guess, that is called the History of Crime and Criminal Justice series, with David R. Johnson and Jeffrey S. Adler as the series editors.
Okay.
And it kind of went through a few decades of like crime and that's, things that were going on. And it was really helpful. And it had a few pages on this case. So real helpful for that. The events in 1811, January 8th, the German Coast Slave Revolt led by Charles Deslandes. I think it's Deslandes. Not sure. I tried. But that broke out in St. Charles and St. James, Louisiana. On January 22nd, the Casas Revolt began in San Antonio, which was in opposition to the Mexico War of Independence. That was also almost a case that I covered, but not a lot of information on it. So it was kind of hard to...
Can't cover it if you can't figure out stuff about it.
I mean, there was information, but it wasn't... it was one of those that there's like, oh, there's information here, but there's not enough information here.
Yeah, it would be like a 5-minute podcast.
Yeah. So, then March 22nd, the Commissioner's Plan of 1811 for Manhattan is presented. This was the original design for the streets of Manhattan above Houston Street and below 155th. This created the rectangular street grid that Manhattan is known for today. This has been described as the single most important document in New York City's development.
Interesting.
So, and that was done all the way back in 1811, which is pretty cool that it's still considered that today. July 9th, British explorer David Thompson posted a notice in modern-day Washington state claiming the area for the UK.
Interesting.
This is ours now.
Yeah, that didn't last.
It's
Did
fine.
not last.
This is ours. October 11th, inventor John Stevens' boat, the Juliana, begins operation as the first steam-powered ferry. November 7th, American troops, led by William Henry Harrison, defeated the Native American chief Tecumseh in the Battle of Tippecanoe. December 16th, the New Madrid earthquake in Mississippi Valley near New Madrid reversed the course of the river. December 26th, the Richmond Theater fire in Virginia killed 72 people, including the governor of Virginia, George William Smith, and the president of the First National Bank of Virginia, Abraham B. Venable. So, also looked into that to see how that would, there wasn't a lot of information on it either.
It's very sad.
So, let's get to our people who were born this year.
Okay.
January 17th, George S. Houston. We are really the only ones that are going to care about this one, but I had to include it. George S. Houston, governor of Alabama from 1874 to 1878, is born. He's Capricorn. February 3rd, Horace Greeley, the founder and editor of the New York Tribune, was born. He's an Aquarius. June 14th, right close-ish to mine, Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was, some people might recognize her name, but she was an abolitionist and she was the writer of Uncle Tom's Cabin. She was a Gemini. So those are really the only ones that we had for this year that were, a lot of the others were like, oh, it was this politician from this time. I was like,
meh.
The only reason I included the Alabama one is because we're in Alabama.
There you go.
So on to the case. December 15th of 1811, 17-year-old George was savagely murdered by Isham and Lilburn Lewis. February 9th of 1812, a portion of George's body was found by a farmer named Hurley, and George's gruesome murder was finally discovered. We'll get to it because I know that look on your face.
Oh, a portion of his body.
I knew that's what it was going to be. I was like, this
is heinous.
It's bad. So there's
portion.
Yeah, there's never a good true crime case or murder. But this one is especially, weirdly enough, Leah just said the word, heinous, and the murder is very graphic. This will be a medium-level trigger warning episode today, and this episode involves significant violence towards slaves. So if that's not something that you would like to hear about, I will give you plenty of warning as far as that portion of the story that we will get to, because it is pretty bad. We'll get into it. We've discussed before that in this genre of podcasts that we've kind of like found ourselves in, that we never want to make it seem like we're exploiting someone's murder for downloads or better ratings. This is a case that I had never heard of, and I had to search for a pretty good bit to even find it. We are covering this murder specifically because George's case is not well known. And George, much like Dr. Durham, George deserves more than to be lost to history. there's also a reason that I have not given George a last name.
I was about to ask why we don't know his name.
We do know the name.
Oh.
And y'all might notice that when I titled this episode, the title of the episode is The Murder of George. I did that for a specific reason. And I've had a really hard time with this one because I'm very conflicted as to whether I should put his given last name, which was Lewis. This is the same last name as the two monsters who brutally murdered George without any remorse and with reckless abandonment to human life.
Oh, were they his?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Because, I mean, they were viewed as his owners, even though...
Exactly. Even though people are not owned.
But at the time, that is how it was viewed.
Correct. And I have a really hard time because, okay, if you look up anything about George to kind of, if anybody really does want to look into it more, trust me, this episode will be enough for you. But if you really do want to look into it more, the ways that people have titled him in some places is either George Lewis, Slave George, which I don't like, and then Lilburn Lewis's George. And I have a hard time with all of those.
Yeah.
And I don't, I just have a really hard time giving him, like, putting the name, because when I get to the description of the murder and when I get to that point, you will understand immensely why I have a very hard time with that.
But I will say,
I just don't want it to seem callous that I'm not giving him a last name. There's a reason.
Right. But I will say when slaves were freed, they did, a lot of them, I mean, a lot of times they would choose a last name for themselves, you know.
Right.
But a lot of times they would take on the last name of the family that they lived with.
That was how Dr. Durham got his last name, because we talked about it in that episode. And so, I do understand that, and I understand that's kind of how the way things were, but
again, a person is a person, not a piece of property. And I totally get it.
And he did not.
This is a different scenario.
This is very different. And it's very, it's kind of like when, in some cases, and people understand, like in our case of, Fairbanks, when he's buried in the same cemetery as Elizabeth Fales. Like, it's kind of like one of those things of, like, I have a real hard time when like the husband who murdered the wife is buried next to her. I have a problem with that.
It rankles.
And then I also have a problem with giving someone the last name of the people who murdered him when that's not truly his last name. And unfortunately, he never got to be freed and choose his own last name.
Right.
As I said, he was 17. So, yeah.
What a way to start this one out.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I know. But it is a story that needs to be told. It is a very interesting episode because this is also a year that a lot of weird stuff happened in the U.S. And we'll kind of go into it a little bit more. So this is going to kind of be a good mixture of an episode of kind of history, a good bit of history that was going on at the time. We're going to go into a family tree that's going to take a little bit of time to go through. And, we'll also discuss the murder. But there are a lot of events that I'm going to discuss that occurred around the time of George's murder, because several of these events might be why it took so long for anyone to take notice of his murder. So
how long did it take?
He was killed in December, and it was February that anyone realized what had happened.
So not a horribly long time, but still...
It would have been noticed way earlier if some of these events did not happen.
Right.
So it's going to seem like I'm jumping around in some parts, but I have a rhyme and a reason to it. So
you always have a plan.
I try to. Our case this week takes place in Smithland, Kentucky, which was founded in 1780. Smithland I think it's Smithland. Smithland, who knows? It's located Smithland?
I just like to throw a little wrench in your plan.
Who knows? Either way, it's located in Livingston County on the western side of the state, and its border of the county touches Illinois.
Okay.
It's also where the Ohio and the Cumberland rivers merge together. Livingston County is a dry county, with the exception of Grand Rivers. How long do you think it took them? When do you think they finally allowed alcohol sales in Grand Rivers? The whole county is dry except for this one city. So what year do you think they would have made it to where you could sell alcohol there? Or purchase or whatever?
2005.
2016.
I knew it had to be. It had to be like relatively.
I saw that and I was like, "What? What?
What in the Alabama? What?
Yeah, seriously. It wasn't until recently, the past couple of years, you couldn't buy alcohol on Sundays anywhere. You could buy it at a restaurant. You could get it at a restaurant, but you could not purchase alcohol on Sundays.
Yeah, but now it's after 12 now. Yeah,
because let me tell you something. You go to the lake or you go to the pool or you do something nice on your nice Sunday and you go, you know what? I'm going to stop by the gas station and I'm going to grab some nice, refreshing beverages for my day. And it is before noon. You just stroll all the way up there, you will get the worst looks. And I'm like, excuse me, so sorry.
Yeah.
So still can't buy it before noon, but at least we can at least buy it on Sunday. They used to rope off the aisles. And I know some people are going to think this is crazy, but they used to rope off the aisle where the wine and the beer was. So you couldn't go down
in church before then. I'm just saying.
It's supposed to be. I mean, that's true. But
just saying.
Jesus turned water to wine, so I'm just saying.
He did. At a wedding.
In 1961, Smithland was the filming location for How the West Was Won, which starred Jimmy Stewart, Debbie Reynolds, and Walter Brennan. And other than this terrible case, that's all that Smithland is really known for, which is real sad.
One extreme to the other.
Yeah. So there's that. So the year of 1811 was...
Can we just stop for a second?
What?
I love me some Jimmy Stewart.
I like Debbie Reynolds.
And I love Debbie Reynolds too. But I mean, I love me some Jimmy Stewart. That's just some apple pie... Good old Americana right there.
I'm pretty sure it was. Debbie Reynolds was, Halloweentown.
Yeah, I think she was the grandmother in it. Yeah, I think
Ellie,
you're right.
My daughter Ellie, she loves Halloweentown. We watch it all year long because we have Disney Plus. And Ellie's like, let's watch Halloweentown. We will not watch Return to Halloweentown, which would be movie 4 in the Halloweentown It is a trilogy because I don't count the 4th movie because they changed Marnie and thought that no one was going to notice.
I don't know all this, but I believe you.
And if anybody else paid attention or liked those movies, I love Halloweentown. It's a nostalgic movie for me. But yeah, Debbie Reynolds was the grandmother in it, and Ellie. And I loved her so much in those movies. And Ellie loves her. She's like, I wish I had a grandmother that was like her. Aww. And she's like, she's a witch. And I was like, she is a witch. And she goes, but she's a really nice one.
So funny. Well, my mom is from Scotland. And it has been so much fun she is an alien, but she's a legal alien. Like she has an alien card, legal alien. And Mother does not mess around with my nephews like I do. Like we all mess with them, just joke with them. And it has been so much fun telling my nephews at different times, when they're different ages or, younger, that Gigi is an alien because they're like, no, she's not. She's an alien. And we'll say, well, ask her. And she'll say,
has a card to prove it.
Yeah.
Guys.
She's like, yeah, I'm an alien. Yeah, I've got a card. And they're like, oh, Gigi's an alien because, she doesn't really mess with them like that. And then she shows them a card that says she's an alien and it freaks them out. Oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever.
That is so funny.
So anyway, yeah.
I mean, if you got to do stuff like that.
It's so fun.
It's crazy.
So we kind of had a segue, but I love Jimmy Stewart. I love him. So continue.
The year of 1811 was considered the year of miracles.
Oh.
Or Annus Mirabilis.
Try that again?
Nope. However, I don't know.
What language was that?
I think it's supposed to be Latin, but the way that the first word is spelled, not here for it. Oh goodness. Yeah.
That was awesome.
But while it's called the Year of Miracles, this might not be the type of miracle that you would be imagining. This is kind of miracle in the sense of not, oh, that's a miracle that happened. It's like the bad miracles that you're like, oh, that's a miracle. It's because when I saw Year of Miracles, I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then I went to go read it and I was like, this is not a miracle. What is this?
Oh, no.
It's interesting. Stuff was going on this year. So the U.S. was having a record drought that was debilitating to many farmers.
That's no good.
There was a major squirrel migration.
Squirrel migration. Squirrels don't migrate.
There was a squirrel migration. So, and it's a major, so it's a major squirrel migration. If I were to say a major migration of squirrels, how many squirrels do you think a major migration would be?
I mean, that's kind of like how much would a
woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
That's what this question sounds
so
like to me.
If there were a major movement of squirrels and it was taken notice of, how many squirrels do you think would be moving at once?
10,000.
Millions.
From where to where? Where did they go? Where did you come from? Where did you go? I mean,
so
a squirrel migration? What?
Then,
like a plague of locusts? Are these plagues?
Pretty much. So then, sorry guys, this is trigger warning for squirrels. But
squirrels in my pants. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Squirrels in my pants.
Hundreds. This is not funny. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Hundreds of thousands of squirrels were drowning in the Ohio River because they were trying to get across the river. And all I can think of is like one squirrel going across and drowning and the other squirrel like
using them as a float.
Yeah. Like froggering it across so high.
I'm thinking of Scrat from Ice Age.
Oh gosh, it's so bad.
That's so bad. Look, I'm sorry. My brother has a shirt that says "Squirrels, Nature's Little Speed Bumps," and I love animals. I love animals, but we have so many squirrels where I live. We have so many squirrels, and they dig up the yard, and I love squirrels, and I love animals, and I love to watch the squirrels play around. But I'm just saying, lots of squirrels.
So imagine millions.
Oh my gosh,
migrating south.
That's where they all came from.
It gets better.
Oh no. Now, where do they come from again?
North. That's all we know. They migrated from the north.
I mean, I've had squirrel dumplings before. Yes, I'm that Southern.
Hold on. If the squirrels weren't enough.
Oh, no. Don't tell me there were snakes.
No. America's passenger pigeon population skyrocketed, and they quite literally took to the sky. So how many pigeons does it take to cause a panic amongst the U.S.?
Millions.
Billions. Billions of squirrels. So you have millions of squirrels migrating south. And then you got billions of pigeons.
These are not miracles. These are plagues.
That's what I was saying.
These are plagues of biblical proportions.
Oh, gosh. It said that there were so many birds that the sky and the woods would darken from the flocks.
Oh, no.
Not only are the birds terrifying,
and the squirrels are menacing,
but when the birds would come through, they were congregating in such large flocks.
The poops were everywhere.
No, they would take to the trees, to like rest. There were so many pigeons, they were stripping the trees bare from landing on the trees.
Oh, no.
It's not funny, but it's funny. And they said that you could look into the woods, and the woods during the day would just look black because there were so many pigeons.
Oh, no. I bet the poop was bad, too, though. Think about that.
It was. So,
hey, Ma, the wagon's covered in bird poop again.
It's so bad. So, in September of 1811, there was a solar eclipse.
Total eclipse of the sun. Hey, I'm in rare form today, friend.
The solar eclipse covered the Midwest.
Oh, and was it a total eclipse?
Yes.
Oh, so they thought it was the end of the world. There were biblical
Hold on, it gets better.
Plagues.
And
was there somebody that was giving out Kool-Aid, like saying,
no,
this is the end?
So, and there is a massive twin-tailed comet flying.
Oh, my stars.
Flying across the U.S. sky for 17 months. This was the Tecumseh Comet, and it could clearly be seen in October of 1811, and it disappeared in April of 1812. This comet has been blamed for setting off a series of events when it was assumed that it crashed to Earth. Assumed. So, fun fact about this comet, Tecumseh's Comet, how they know these things, I don't know. But it will not return until the year 3775.
Well, praise the Lord for that. I don't want to be here when there's a massive migration of squirrels and pigeons. Wait, didn't the carrier pigeons, right?
It's a passenger pigeon. They're extinct now.
Pigeon. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, they're extinct.
They all got killed.
So Native Americans and locals in the area assumed that the comet crashed right into the Ohio River. And they also thought that it was a prophecy of the coming war with Indians at Tippecanoe, and that the comet caused a series of earthquakes in the area. That's
not a good year.
Just think about this in 1811.
That's a lot going on in one year.
You got millions of squirrels, billions of birds
that are now extinct.
You got this crazy comet that's flying across the sky that you've been able to see for 12 months now, and it's still not going to end. There's a total eclipse in the Midwest.
Wow.
And everybody is just like, this is it. This is the end. We're done.
Where's the guy with the sandwich board and the bell?
It's
this is not a year of miracles. I don't know why it's called a year of miracles. It should be called something else. It should be called the year of plagues.
It gets better.
There's more.
I briefly touched on the New Madrid earthquake that actually reversed the course of the river in the Mississippi Valley. Talked about that up at top. Kentucky, the Ohio Valley, and most of the central United States was shaken up quite literally from 3 seismic earthquakes that took place from December of 1811 to February of 1812. In addition, there were over 2,000 tremors, which were centralized to northern Arkansas and New Madrid, Missouri. They could be felt from Mississippi to Boston, even up to Montreal.
Whoa.
Shout out to our Canadians. Hello. From the desk in the Oval Office, President James Madison wrote, "There was one earthquake here this morning at 5 or 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. It was rather stronger than any preceding one and lasted several minutes, with sinister, though very slight, repetitions through the succeeding hour." When I say there were tremors, like continuous for 3 months, the ground was shaking for 3 months.
Wow.
And then it was like a major earthquake, tremors. Another major earthquake, tremors.
I do not want a ticket for that ride. Thank you.
So, the year of miracles.
Those are not miracles, friends. Those are not miracles.
And all I can think about with the squirrels is they were drowning in the Ohio River. So just imagine if you live in the southern part where the Ohio River is and you just see thousands of dead squirrels.
Bloated squirrels.
Like coming down the river.
Okay.
And you don't know what's going on because none of the squirrels have gotten to you yet. They're
Except
just
the
going
dead ones.
down river. And you just see thousands of dead squirrels floating by. Like a raft of dead squirrels passing by. And you're like,
what happened to these squirrels, man?
As the Midwest eclipse is overtaking you, and these squirrels just pass by. With like the pigeons sitting on their back just along for the ride. I can't. These people, they probably were like, "We're done.
Yeah,
this is it."
Yep. So I have a squirrel story. Do you want to hear a squirrel story?
Sure.
So when we bought our house, it had an above ground pool, and we hired some teenage boys to clean it out. One of which has listened at least to our first episode. Hi, Andrew. He gave us a really great review. And
he's I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, a policeman.
He's a police officer.
Yeah,
so
we love their
so
family.
Fancy.
Yes, we love the whole family.
Did he used to cut your grass? Is that the one that used to cut your grass?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he didn't. No.
Okay.
Different. But funnily enough, that guy's first name is Andrew, but he goes by his initials.
Yeah, that's what I thought when you said that. I was like, I remember the initials, but I couldn't remember. No. Okay, continue.
But anyway, so these were brothers, Robert and Andrew, and we hired them to clean out the pool, to get it ready for the summer. And it had not been covered, and there was a tree beside it. And they found found squirrels, and they were like, "Yeah, one of them had been in there for a while. It was pretty bloated. It was so bad.
That's so gross."
We paid them well, though. I hope it was well. Andrew, if it wasn't well, tell me. We'll make it right. But I think it was well. Bless. Sorry if that was too gross.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right.
Good times.
Well, we've at least had fun in the beginning of the episode.
Yes. Poor squirrels.
We're going to take a short field trip back to episode 11.
Popular.
Yeah, did anybody get to see our little Easter egg at the end of episode 11? I hope y'all enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
So we discussed Meriwether Lewis and his very strange death. Well, the Lewises in this case
No.
are one and the same.
No.
Just a different part, but one that we also discussed in that episode as well. Remember when we discussed the sister of Thomas Jefferson was married to Meriwether Lewis's brother?
No.
That couple, Charles Lewis and Lucy Jefferson Lewis, are at the center of this case.
That makes me sad.
I also didn't put this together in the episode that we did on Meriwether, but Charles and Meriwether. So, okay. I also didn't put this together in the episode we did on Meriwether, but remember that Charles and Meriwether's stepfather was related to Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
Was related to Thomas Jefferson. Charles's wife's name is Lucy Jefferson. Yes. So then Charles went on to marry Lucy Jefferson. This made Charles and Lucy technically first cousins.
Oh.
Their children, from oldest to youngest, were Randolph, Isham, which he's one of our people in this case, Jane Jefferson, Lilburn, who's the other one in this.
What's the name?
Lilburn, like Lilburn.
Is that his rapper name?
Like Lilburn. It's one word. It's a very weird. But that was Charles's middle name.
Okay. I'm sorry.
His dad's middle name. So there was Lilburn, then Charles, then Mary Randolph, then Lucy, then Martha, and Anne, who went by Nancy, making a grand total of 9 children. Too many. Yes. Moving on. When the family moved, 9 children, 9. When the family moved to Kentucky, because they did live in Virginia, because remember the Lewises went back to Virginia, the whole thing.
Right.
When they moved to Kentucky, 6 of the 9 children moved with them.
Like the older 3 probably were already established. 2
of the daughters stayed behind in Virginia. I think it was Jane Jefferson and Mary Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were the 2 that stayed behind. Also, Mary Randolph married Thomas, the son of Randolph Jefferson.
They all kinds of intermingled.
Randolph, which she was also named partially after. Her name was Mary Randolph. Like Randolph was her middle name.
So she's Mary Randolph Randolph.
No, she would be a Jefferson because she married. Yeah, so Randolph.
Okay, sorry, I got
was
confused.
the younger brother of Thomas Jefferson and Lucy Jefferson, which would make Mary's husband her first cousin as well. You cannot make this up.
Is this Jerry Springer?
This is not. But as I'm researching this, I'm like, what? What?
Wow.
So Mary Randolph then became Mary Randolph Jefferson. So it's
so
like
confusing.
So Mary Randolph Jefferson married Randolph Jefferson. Married Thomas Randolph Jefferson. both of their middle and last names were the same.
Just too much. Just too much.
I told you. It's so weird.
I can't.
All right.
I mean, this was very common, but it's so weird.
It's so weird. And they were not from Alabama. So,
I mean, I'm just saying, my daddy went out of country to bring in new blood, and I had to go out of county because I'm related to so many people where I'm from. I'm just saying.
She's not related to her husband.
No, I'm not. I mean, my sister and I both went out of county just to make sure.
So, all right. We've had a little bit of fun. now that we've set all this up, we're going to get to George and the events that contributed to his murder. Mm-hmm. George was born into slavery in 1794 in Albemarle, Virginia. And that's about as much as we know about his early life. Oh. When he was older, George was described as ill-grown and ill-thrived, with a scar over one eye that was caused by, quote, an independent nature. Don't know what that means.
So are we thinking he was like thin and sickly?
Possibly. I think that's kind of where that's the direction it was going in, I think, kind of. I looked up the terms ill-grown and ill-thrived, couldn't find them.
Yeah, to me it sounds like maybe he was
thinner.
Yeah, or maybe even like malnourished, maybe is what I'm thinking. You know how and if there was a scar, how was the scar described?
It was just over one eye, and it was caused by an independent nature. So maybe he had like an accident or something, like, and it caused a scar.
Or even it was over an eye, but I'm thinking like kids that have like a cleft lip. Mm-hmm. Maybe there was a deformity or something that could cause something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like there could have been some sort of something like that. Mm-hmm. And, he could have been malnourished. He could have been underweight. And so, or he could have had, there are, like if you watch The Middle, I watched The Middle, the youngest kid on there, the actor that, I don't know the actor's name. I'm sorry, I don't know all the actors' names. He has a genetic mutation, mm-hmm. whatever it is called. I'm sorry, I don't know the right terms. And he didn't grow like most people do. There's a genetic mutation there. So maybe he had that, and that could be part of it, like, right. like a stunted, not necessarily dwarfism, but just something that kept him from forming like most people do.
Right.
So it could be something like that.
Right.
Just my thoughts.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, and I wasn't quite sure exactly what they meant by it.
And they didn't have the medical terms that we have now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's quite what they. I don't know. It was just a very weird term that they used for it. So, in 1808, Charles and Lucy, like I said, moved 6 of their 9 children to Smithland, Kentucky, to run away from their financial problems and start over.
And he had been with them his whole life?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So George and the other slaves from their Albemarle home, of course, went with them. Mm-hmm. Lucy died in 1811, leaving Charles to take care of the younger children alone. Mm. Charles was described as consistently irresponsible, and thankfully he had help taking care of the 2 youngest children, Martha, and then the other one, Anne, who went by Nancy.
At least he was consistent.
In something. Yeah. So.
And I don't get Nancy from Martha. I don't get that.
Anne.
Oh.
She was Anne. Nancy? Not sure. The oldest of the children, Randolph, and his wife, Randolph's wife was also his cousin, Mary. It's so weird. They stepped in to help Charles, but Randolph and Mary also died in 1811. They had 8 children of their own.
Nice.
The only, quote, responsible child left old enough to help was Lilburn, who was just starting to recoup from the death of his first wife and taking care of their 5 children.
Oh, heavens.
Altogether at this point, there are 8 children who are orphaned and another 7 who were presumably young enough to still be living at home. 15 children total.
That's a lot of kids. As my daddy would say, that's a passel of youngins.
Let this be an example of my two-child theory. 15 children. So Lilburn begrudgingly remarried a woman named Letitia, who at the time of their marriage was 8 months pregnant with Lilburn's child.
Oh.
Chivalry isn't dead. I'm being very sarcastic. There was a malaria.
I kind of caught that.
Yeah. There was a malaria outbreak, which led to medical bills that couldn't be paid. There were quite literally children everywhere.
Yeah.
And Lilburn was in a perpetual state of mourning over his deceased wife, Elizabeth.
Oh.
Don't feel bad for him. So.
That is sad.
Don't feel bad for him. Lilburn and Isham were the two brothers that trouble just seemed to follow them everywhere they went.
I've taught a few kids like that.
In the great words of Marshall Mathers, a.k.a. Eminem, this is what happens when a tornado meets a volcano. These two were the epitome of that expression. Isham, the tornado that rips through everything and causes chaos wherever he goes. And then Lilburn, the volcano that sits there waiting to erupt. And when he does, the results are catastrophic. It reminds me of in Disney's Hercules, which, guys, if you've not seen, that's one of the best Disney movies of all time.
This weekend.
They were kept, like the Titans that were in Disney's Hercules, they were kept locked up. And then once they were out, there was Pyros, the lava titan, that just spewed hot lava and flames. And then Stratos was the air titan who was literally a walking tornado. And for anyone who was wondering, because I was, the other two titans were Lithos, the two-headed rock monster, and Hydros, the giant ice
Which
skeleton.
one was Kronos then?
There wasn't one.
I thought there was a Kronos.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Nope. So these two kept trying to ride on the coattails of their famous uncle, Thomas, and tried name-dropping around St. Louis and Natchez, hoping that they could literally cash in on the relationship, whether in the form of a bank loan or a job. The name-dropping didn't go well, and they weren't even able to find jobs, let alone be given any money by anyone.
Did anybody tell them to stop name dropping?
Just wait.
Uh-oh.
Isham sent a letter on April 27th of 1809 to his uncle. This was back before any of the financial hardships or any of the deaths in the family.
Okay.
Let's go to the letter and see what you think. Quote, "Dear Sir, the great desire which I feel to be placed in some employ whereby I may secure to myself the happiness derivable from the idea of enjoying the fruits of well-spent industry and the difficulty I find in attaining this object unassisted by any influential friend, has induced me to beg the favor of your endeavors in my behalf. I am in hopes that you will be less disposed to think hard of this request when I assure you it is produced from necessity, brought on not from my own imprudence, but those of an unfortunate father whose promises of wealth and neglect to bring me up in any useful pursuit has brought on me the want of the former and occasions me to deplore in his inattention to the latter." So to break that down for you.
He's saying, I hate to do this, but my daddy's a good for nothing and I need your help.
I can't find a job. No one will give me a job because you're my uncle. I need a job because I have no money. The reason I have no money is because my father is a POS who promised me money and he didn't teach me any useful skills.
Yeah.
This is why I need money. Oh, also my dad is still a POS. Old Uncle Thomas wrote back on May 1st, which was super quick, by the way, because the first letter went out on April 27th, and on May 1st, he had already received it and wrote back. And he said, "Dear sir, it is with real concern that I learn the disagreeable situation in which you are for want of employment, and the more so as I do not see any way in which I can propose to you any certain relief. As to offices under the government, they are few. They are always full, and 20 applicants for one vacancy when it happens. They are miserable also, given a bare subsistence with the least chance of doing anything for the future. The army is full, and in consequence of the late pacification, will probably be reduced." To the subtitles of that. "I hate that your father has turned into a POS. I cannot get you a job. There aren't any jobs in government that you are qualified for.
Sucks to be you.
And the positions that I have opened have 20 actual qualified people applying for them. They also need money. The Army can't take you because we aren't doing much there right now. So again, sorry about your POS dad, but you're SOL."
Sucks to be you.
Yep. In that same letter, he did tell Isham that if he would come back to Virginia, then he could teach Isham how to survey land. But it doesn't seem that Isham ever responded to doing that.
You mean you actually want me to learn a trade, to learn how to do something and work at something?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, right? So
that's not what I want to do.
Yeah. So I told you that it kind of seemed like I jump around in the timeline, but it all has a purpose. It all lines up. So we're going to go back to 1811 and to what exactly happened to George. By this time, all of the debt had piled up. Lilburn's depression over his mother and his first wife dying just kept finding new lows. And the family's coping mechanism was just heavy drinking.
Oh, that's never good.
And like the lowlife that Lilburn was, he chose to take out those frustrations on the family's slaves, especially George. For some reason, in the middle of December, George disappeared and then showed back up a few days later on December 15th. George was carrying a pitcher of spring water and he tripped. The pitcher shattered. This was an heirloom pitcher, and it belonged to Lucy, the mother of the Lewis family, who had just passed away not long before. Like I said before, the men in this family were known to drink, and like some people, the more they drank, the worse they were. You know that saying that like a drunk mind speaks sober thoughts? Well, a drunk mind also acts on those sober thoughts. For those who aren't familiar with homes at this time, I need to go ahead and say this ahead. For those who aren't familiar with homes at this time, the kitchen was separate from the structure of the main house. One reason was in the event that the kitchen caught fire, it wouldn't take the rest of the house with it. Lilburn and Isham dragged the crying and apologetic George to the kitchen house. This is your trigger warning. This is going to be a medium trigger warning. It is very graphic and takes a bit of explanation because this is an account of the actual murder given by the people who were there. You're probably going to want to skip forward 3 minutes, 5 minutes if you don't want to hear it. It's rough. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start into that. So if you want to skip forward, do it now. The brothers took ropes and tied George down to the chopping block in the kitchen.
Oh my.
Lilburn forced the rest of the slaves inside and locked the door and then forced them to build a fire.
Oh dear. I don't like the sound of this.
It's rough. I forewarned you. Lilburn was shouting at the other slaves that he was going to teach them a lesson in not disobeying him.
How did George disobey?
Exactly.
Just asking.
I think it could be partially because he did disappear for a short time. So I think maybe that kind of, I don't know I don't know. I don't know how he disobeyed. I'm not sure.
Okay.
He broke a pitcher. I don't know. He raised an axe over his head and with one swing almost decapitated George. There are a few stories here. One says that Lilburn started to dismember George, starting at his feet and making his way up.
Oh, dear.
Another more sinister story is that Lilburn ordered another one of the slave men to dismember George and throw the parts into the fire to try and hide the death.
Oh, my.
The third is that George was alive during the ordeal.
Oh, dear.
And rather than almost decapitation, the other slave was forced at gunpoint to start the dismemberment at his feet.
Oh, my.
Either way, all of the stories are horrible, no matter which one you choose.
Yeah.
It's unsure exactly where Isham comes in, but while the murder was happening, the brothers were telling the other slaves that the same would happen to them if they weren't quiet about the murder.
And neither one stopped the other.
Correct. Once they were finished and had put all of the evidence in the fire, the door was unlocked and the slaves were forced back to their quarters, panic-stricken about what they had seen and afraid the same thing would happen to them. And that's the end of the description.
I don't think that was 3 minutes.
It might not have been, but either way, I wanted to give whoever wanted to skip ahead, I wanted to give them more than enough time because that's a pretty gruesome one.
That was bad.
It was really hard to read because that actually didn't go into full detail. I took some detail out.
I'm glad you did.
Because it was really rough.
I'm glad you did.
It was around midnight when the brothers were finally done, and I suppose satisfied with themselves because they didn't seem bothered by any of it. 2 hours later at 2 a.m. on December 16th, the first of the 3 earthquakes that we discussed before took place. The epicenter was in the northeast portion of Arkansas. Everyone was awakened by the violent shaking, and Lilburn watched as the chimney in the kitchen house collapsed. This put out the still roaring fire and exposed portions of the half-burnt body. The aftershock the next morning was ranked at a 7.4 on the Richter scale and produced rolling tremors every 10 minutes for the next several hours.
So I wonder when the Richter scale was devised.
It was after this, but based off of everything that researchers could find, that was how they ranked the destruction that was around was how they ranked these earthquakes.
Because it surprised me that it was ranked on the Richter scale. Okay.
Yeah, the rankings were done afterwards, and it was based on accounts and based on a bunch of other things.
Inquiring minds.
Right. So,
sorry.
But the rolling tremors didn't stop Lilburn from forcing the slaves to rebuild the chimney immediately.
So he could finish the deed.
Rolling tremors or not.
Because he's got to cover up.
And when I say rolling tremors, it was described like the earth was moving in like waves.
Yeah, wow.
So squirrels, waves, and birds. I don't know. Yeah. So while rebuilding the chimney, the slaves were told to hide pieces of the body in the masonry. But
in the masonry.
But they missed one very important part.
Oh, dear. Before
we get to that portion, we're going to breathe for a second. Because, yeah.
Are we going to have a happy break? Are you going to tell me a joke? What are we going to do?
So this was not just a normal earthquake. I know that our listeners in California, because we do have several of them, hello.
Hi.
They're probably rolling their eyes. How bad could it be, right? In New Madrid, the earthquake created Reelfoot Lake and drowned several dozen people in the nearby Indian village.
Oh, no.
The Mississippi River flowed backwards for several hours. It flowed backwards.
Did you not have said Native American village? Should you not have said Native American village?
Which part?
You said Indian village.
I think where they were at this point, it was not part of the United States officially yet. So they would still be considered Indians, I guess, technically.
Oh, I'm just curious.
I don't know.
I want to keep you straight
Right.
and not get in trouble.
Right. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Could be Native American, could be. Either way, people were drowned.
Okay. Which is bad.
Correct. Yeah, so the Mississippi River flowed backwards for several hours. And
that's kind of creepy.
It's very creepy. And formed 2 waterfalls. Trees were swallowed into the ground and giant tar balls were shooting out of the cracks in the ground.
That's wild.
There was a thick black smog that covered a lot of the areas, and quartz crystals were pushed out of the ground. And with the shifting of the plates, there was an odd light coming from the cracks. The light refracted off of the quartz and caused something called, ready for this? Mm-hmm. A seismoluminescence.
Ooh.
So you have an entire river that started flowing backwards.
Right. And they didn't have smog because they didn't have all the, exhaust and fumes and such.
Correct.
Like, we're used to smog now.
You have tar being shot out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Trees that have fallen in the cracks.
No. Trees have not fallen.
They were swallowed.
Have been...
Yeah. The earth reclaimed them.
Did you like that sound effect?
It was much appreciated. The earth they reclaimed the trees. They said, these are ours. That's right. And then you have the ground has something like sticking glowing out of it, and it's glowing.
I mean,
so given
next
all of
thing
this,
you're going to tell me is that there were woolly mammoths walking around.
I know, right? So we got our squirrels, we got our birds, we got our comet,
journey to the center of the earth.
We've got our earthquake. We've got.
It's a lot happening.
Yeah. So given all of it, it's not hard to see how people would get distracted. And also think that the world is quite literally ending.
And who's going to notice?
Year of miracles.
Yeah. And who's going to notice one person missing when there's all this upheaval going on? And maybe he was swallowed up like a tree.
So the earth kept shaking for 5 more weeks.
Oy.
And on January 23rd of 1812, another earthquake clocked in at 7.8 on the Richter scale and kept the ground tremors going.
Whew.
Then February 7th of 1812, the third and final earthquake, and the one called the most devastating ever recorded in lower North America east of the Mississippi struck. The magnitude is estimated to have been an 8.1, and it is still listed at number 9 for the worst earthquakes in U.S. history.
Wow.
This last one caused that chimney to come tumbling down again. And that one part that they left out shook loose. So 2 nights after the final earthquake, a farmer named Hurley was riding his horse in Smithland.
Please tell me he was Burley and they called him Burley Hurley.
I don't know.
That'd be awesome.
Hurley.
I'm sorry.
A stray dog trotted up to Hurley, carrying something in his mouth. It was the charred remains of a human head.
Oh, no. So it was definitely identifiable.
Hurley thought it might have been a casualty from the earthquakes.
Well, sure.
And he almost shrugged it off. But then that little voice that's in everyone's head said, no, might be something else. And he went to find Sheriff Robert Kirk. The men returned to where the head was found and examined it. Sheriff Kirk noticed a very large scar over one eye and remembered a 17-year-old slave in the area named George who had the same scar. He also recalled that George had kind of gone missing back in December and that the Lewises never reported George missing or even tried to offer a reward for his capture and return, which is what commonly would have happened at that time. Well, if 2 and 2 make 4, then a charred head, an unreported missing man, and 2 reject brothers equal arrests.
Yeah.
Thankfully, at this time, murdering a slave was illegal in Western Kentucky. And with all of the evidence the sheriff found, this was a pretty open and shut case.
Thankfully.
The brothers tried to say it was an accident, but with all of the circumstances, everyone knew this was a lie.
Yeah.
They appeared in court, and bail was set for the brothers to remain in custody.
And they didn't have the money to pay it, I hope.
The prosecutor, Delaney, wanted the trial to begin immediately, but the judge postponed it for 3 months. Somehow, the brothers were able to get 5 landowners, of course men, to sign bail securities, essentially bail bonds, and the brothers returned home.
I believe that's called the Good Old Boy Network.
Letitia, remember Letitia? The wife that Lilburn really didn't want to marry and did it begrudgingly and then always was sad about his first wife, which I get, but still.
I mean, he married her when she was about to give birth to their child.
Begrudgingly. Remember that. Shalori, not dead. She was wise enough to get out of Dodge.
Good
and
her.
Took her 2-month-old baby to her father's farmhouse in Salem, Kentucky, which was around 16 miles away. She was terrified that she was in danger of being harmed too, and that she could be pulled into the crime and accused of aiding the brothers somehow.
Yeah, was like, hey, Dad, it's worse than I thought.
Yeah, didn't do this. Bye.
Yeah. I am not getting caught up in that crazy town.
Well, Lilburn just couldn't handle the abandonment, even though he did not care for Letitia.
Oh, dear.
Trigger warning. He tried to convince his brother into a suicide pact.
Oh, dear.
We will talk more about this topic coming up in case that is triggering for anyone. We're going to go into it a little bit more in detail. The pact was supposed to take place on April 10th of 1812. They took rifles with them to the graveyard where Lilburn's first wife was buried. They were supposed to face each other, with one holding the gun against the other's chest, and they were supposed to fire at the same time.
So it wasn't a suicide pact, it was a murder pact.
Pretty much. So, before they began, Isham asked Lilburn what would happen if one of the guns misfired. Because then one of them would be dead, the other one wouldn't. This part is a little cringeworthy, so if you're squeamish, skip forward a few seconds.
Can I plug my ears?
Nope. Lilburn went to show his brother how to make sure the gun didn't misfire.
Oh, dear. I don't want to hear.
He put the gun to his chest.
Oh, no.
And used a stick to pull the trigger.
Oh.
The gun fired.
Oh.
Yeah. The gun fired accidentally and went straight into his chest. It blew his chest open and he died instantly.
That's no good.
My opinion, he didn't deserve to die so quickly, but, just me. Isham ran. He was like, I can't. Bye.
And whose idea was it to have this pact?
Lilburn's, the one who's now dead. Lilburn had his will in his pocket and a note to his, quote, beloved and cruel Letitia. Yeah. So the coroner...
wait a minute. Stop. Pause.
Guys, Leah's trying to regain her composure. She can't handle.
I don't want to you know,
You can
rehash
speak
all
ill
that
of
happened.
Lilburn
No, I'm trying to think of a way to rehash what he done did
without saying what he did.
What he did.
Right. So the events that happened, he's
going to do all the things that he did.
He saw it. Isham saw it. It's not sure how involved Isham was, but he didn't stop it.
He did. Yeah. He's going to participate in all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to call this wife that said, hey, this family be crazy. I don't want to be tied up and caught up in all this mess. Bye. I'm going back to daddy. Bye, y'all. She's cruel.
She's cruel. Yeah. Yeah. And her husband, who's now deceased, is the one who was the main participant in the murder of George. And he calls Letitia cruel.
I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, continue. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying.
Just be ready to be more outraged. So the coroner, John Durow, arrived at the cemetery to review the scene and sign the death certificate. Isham actually reported the death to the coroner. Weird, you couldn't have done that before? Or maybe said, hey, stop. We shouldn't do this to someone. Anyways, okay. Durow then took Isham.
Let me ask a question real quick. Is Isham a younger brother? Is he younger or older?
Older, I think. I'm pretty sure they're right by each other. There's one child in between them, but I'm pretty sure Isham. I want to say, well, actually, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm curious because a lot of times, and
it would be the older brother who's the leader and the younger brother who's
sometimes it's just personality wise,
right.
There's one that's the leader, and so sometimes there is that leader, and you follow what that leader says just because they're the leader. I'm not putting all the blame because you have a tongue in your head. Use it. My mother has said that more than once. You've got a tongue in your head,
right?
You know how it works,
right?
But sometimes it's more difficult to stand up for what's right when that person is the person that has always been the leader that you've always followed for your entire life, and it's a mental thing. We talked about when it's your mom, it's always harder when it's your mom, and this a sibling thing again. It's harder. So continue. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have said something, but mentally I can understand being in that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure which was which. I couldn't remember.
I can't either.
So
you're supposed to be my brain.
I know. Sorry. The coroner then took Isham to the Justice of the Peace in Salem, who went by the wonderful name Baptist Billy.
Oh.
His real name was William Woods. There was a review of the death, and old Baptist Billy acquitted Isham as an accessory to his brother's death, but he was overruled, and Isham was rearrested and put in jail.
Oh.
He was being charged as an accomplice to George's murder and Lilburn's suicide.
Oh.
But, much like our previous murderers, our murderous pals, not pals, if you will, Jason Fairbanks and Micaiah Harp, remember them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know their whole story. I haven't listened to all of them.
Well, Isham escaped from jail less than a month after his arrest, and he was never recaptured.
Oh.
All right. So, it wasn't until 174 years later that any records were found of Isham after he escaped.
What happened?
Roughly 6 weeks after his escape, he enlisted in the U.S. Infantry Company.
Under what name?
This was right before the War of 1812, when the U.S. declared war against England. He rose in the ranks, and there are details, but he's a murderer, and tiny details aren't important. Long story short, he ended up being a sergeant. He was then killed on New Year's Eve in 1814 at the Battle of New Orleans. After he was killed, a woman named Elizabeth, we assume it was his widow, received a pension of $6.50 per month for the next 5 years. It's about $100.
What was his name?
They never said that he changed it.
How interesting.
From everything that I could find, Thomas Jefferson never officially commented on the murders that his nephews committed. Jefferson did say that he was aware of the depression in the entire Lewis family, and that they all seemed to share it. Likely referring to Meriwether Lewis, since at this time it was still believed that Meriwether's death was a suicide.
But it wasn't.
Right. In a journal, Jefferson wrote, Governor Lewis had come from early life, been subject to hypochondriac affections. It was a constitutional disposition in all the nearer branches of his family, and were more immediately inherited by him from his father. They had not, however, been so strong as to give uneasiness to his family. While he lived with me in Washington, I observed at times sensible depressions of mind, but knowing their constitutional source, I estimate their course by what I had seen in the family. In 1953, Robert Penn Warren wrote a book. Well, it's not really a book. It's kind of like a long form poem called Brother to Dragons. And this poem took the actions of the brothers and how it tested Jefferson's faith afterwards. There is another work written by Boynton Merrill Jr. that's called Jefferson's Nephews. It is said that the book is written kind of like a detective story, which is what today we would call like an investigative journalism piece. So what happened to Charles Lewis? When the murders were committed, Charles was 59. He was now the only adult of 6 family members still living.
Oh.
He still had his unmarried daughters and grandchildren to take care of. Once Lilburn died, the court appointed guardians for his children, and 2 of Lilburn's children died before everything was settled. There isn't an exact death date for Charles that I could find, but it was in the year 1831.
Wow.
And that is the story of George.
So sad.
Very sad. We don't really have theories because it's pretty cut and dry as to what happened.
It makes me sad, though.
Like I said, it was a very hard case to read.
Well, the fact that these 2 men did this in front of however many slaves were in the household at the time. So there were witnesses to this.
Many witnesses.
But it wasn't reported because nobody would listen to them. They couldn't report it.
Correct. They could not report it because they had been told while the entire event was happening that if they did, the same thing would happen to them. You are terrified.
Knew it was true.
And you saw. You just saw what happened, and you are terrified for your life.
And because of the Good Old Boy Network, you knew.
Which is still alive and well today, we all know.
Well, slowly
it's dying, but it's still there.
Oh, gosh, yes. But I mean,
we live in areas where that's definitely still the case, which is super unfortunate. But yeah.
But I mean, you knew that there were ways that they would get out of it. They would just wiggle free. And that's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to know that would happen. You know, and you just feel so hopeless. I can't imagine having that feeling, being so frustrated.
So also imagine this too, as I just thought about this. You were made to reconstruct the kitchen house.
Oh my gosh.
Of which parts were hidden in the masonry. not only do you have to cook in the kitchen house where you saw the things happen, you are mere steps away from one, where it happened, and two, parts, human remains that are built into the masonry right beside you.
And you put it in there.
And you put it in there because you were forced to. And you have to work there every day.
Yeah.
And act like nothing happened. Because if you did, same thing would happen to you.
How psychologically scarring would that be?
Which, exactly. And
I mean, like we talked about before.
I was just thinking about that too, of the doctor who actually brought in, hey, when these people are free, they need psychological help because they're not okay. Like this is all messed up and they need something. Like we can't just say, hey, you're free.
Yeah.
Bye. You got like,
yeah.
Hey,
you've got to
let's make sure you're okay, which of course didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, and you see events like this, and this is just one of the events that we found out about and were reported. Think of how many times things like this happened and it was never found out.
Well, and I think of prisoners of war, things that happened, especially like in Vietnam and things, or, in World War II and, people in concentration camps and things,
Oh, the Holocaust, I can't.
I mean...
Right.
These people weren't given psychological aid.
Mm-mm.
The people like I loaned my sister Corrie ten Boom's book, and I have not read it yet. I can't think of the name of the book now because I'm trying to tell you what it is. But she was in the Holocaust, and she's the only one in her family that made it out, I believe. And she came out on the other side and is a great Christian author, but her faith is what helped her through. And the reason she was in the concentration camps was because she was a Christian family, but they were helping Jewish people. And her faith is what helped her through. So she had that, but a lot of people don't have that, or they need something more. People need some sort of help. I mean, I'm a Christian, but I need help with things, and I'm not saying God's not enough. I'm not saying that, but when you've been through something, you need some sort of help. Police officers who have been on really bad cases, or firemen that have been on really bad cases, emergency crews, they are given, psychological evaluations and a chance to talk about it to make sure they're okay, and these people did not have any sort of space to talk about it. They just had to suck it up and move on. That's horrible.
We also know, unfortunately, with some of those psychological evaluations, some people just somehow skate through them.
Yeah.
And they're not okay.
And they don't take them seriously.
No, and they don't. And they should be taken seriously. And yes, and not at all before anyone tries to DM me, because I'll be the one that gets it. We are not at all comparing slavery to prisoners of war.
No.
I'm aware. I know. I'm just making it immensely clear.
Yes.
That is not at all what Leah's saying.
No, I'm just saying a traumatic event,
a traumatic
like
experience.
That. Yes,
correct.
A traumatic event,
and
you see something or experience something horrific.
Correct. And
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I sometimes I understand how some people might half listen to something.
And it could be
correct. And I just want to make it immensely clear that that's not at all what we are saying. And yeah, and it's crazy to me that even back at that time, there were doctors out there who said this needs to happen. And I mean, they weren't listened to, but yeah, I mean, and
it shows how strong these people are, though.
And
I mean, how resilient.
Exactly. And then too, yes, you're strong, you're resilient. It's in a situation that you shouldn't have to be.
Right.
And you should not have to be the bigger person when you are. That's not at all how it should be. And think of also the guilt you have for not saying anything because you're scared and because you're afraid it will happen to you. So you have the trauma,
survivor's guilt.
You have the trauma of seeing what happened.
Yeah.
You have the trauma of purely just being a slave and being in the position that you're put in because you didn't ask for it. You don't want to be there. You're being forced. Having to work in the same kitchen of which everything happened.
Going back and seeing it, reliving it every day.
Every day. And then also feeling guilty that either you didn't do anything or you didn't report it or you didn't stop it.
Yeah.
And none of that is anyone's fault who was in that room, because I understand being paralyzed with fear.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. I know that happens. And there's so many levels to this of just one thing. And it's just, like I said before, like, people always say a drunk mind speaks sober thoughts. So this anger, not even anger, this terrible nature of these two men has always been there.
Yeah.
It's not that this was something that took hours.
Yeah.
It was not a quick, you can't say, oh, it was a crime of passion. No.
Yeah.
Nothing like that's ever excusable. And it's just like, are you serious?
How did the mom die?
She got sick.
She just got sick.
Yeah, Lucy, she got sick and she died.
And how did the wife die?
Same way.
Same way. I'm trying to, see if somehow George could have been involved.
No, they both, well, and Lilburn and his first wife, Elizabeth, did not live with them at the time when Elizabeth died.
I'm just trying to think of some way that maybe.
I think that based on what they said with him being ill-grown, I think George was a target for them because he might have been, like we said, he might have been smaller in stature. Boy. He might have been, and he was 17. And I think, it's not, I'm not saying this in the way that it could be construed, but it's like a lion taking out the weakest antelope, like,
sure.
And I don't mean that in that sense, but I think that is how it could have been seen. He was the
usual target.
Correct.
He was the one that they took out their
and
anger
he was
on.
The easiest one to do that on because he was younger. He was 17. He
he was smaller.
He was smaller.
From all that we read, he was weaker, and they were big bullies.
God, and they said that he disappeared in the middle of December for some time and then came back. And it's like,
had they already heard him once?
And could you just have not come back?
Yeah.
Like, could you just have stayed
gone?
Or
did they hurt him and he, they left him for dead and then he came back? I mean, is that what happened and they got mad that he came back? I mean.
And there's nothing, I tried to look up several different places, kind of, why was he, why did he disappear? Where did he go? I couldn't find anything that said anything about where he went or why he left, or even if they really cared. Like, I didn't even see anything that just said they were angry because he left, like
he had run away with another group.
Right. Yeah. I didn't see anything there that said anything like that. So it's a terrible story, but like I said in the beginning, it's one that needs to be told because his story doesn't deserve to be lost.
Correct.
And just like we talk about before, how sometimes the way that a person's life ends can almost be just as important as how they lived. because how they died can sometimes cause a bigger movement than you're aware of.
Sure.
Like with our very first case that we ever did, who would have thought Elma would have never known that her murder sparked an entire system of trials and murder. You know, she would have never known that. And it's unfortunate to say that someone's death could be, you know, almost important as the way that they lived in life. But, you know, like we said too, at that time, it was illegal to murder a slave in Western Kentucky. Mm-hmm. So it seems that this is a time where people are finally starting to wake up to that.
Yeah.
And
they're people.
Novel idea. Weird. But, you know, it's like, even though you don't know what that murder could have, you don't know what can spark an idea in someone to wake them up to things that are happening.
COVID has been horrible.
Right.
But good things that have come out of COVID. Number one, my sweet puppy Axel had an English Mastiff. He lived to be 1 week shy of 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And the last year of his life, my husband and I were able to both work from home. Mm-hmm. And he ended up having bone cancer. And we know that the reason he was able to hang on as long as he did in the last few months of his life were because we were at home with him and we were able to monitor his day. I mean, each day we were able to see if we needed to give him a little more pain medicine, a little less, and, you know, take him out, help him in and out. I mean, y'all, it was pitiful. He lost a lot of weight. Like, he was 130-pound dog, and he lost a lot of weight, but we were able to monitor. But also, our churches started live streaming services. And so outreach-wise, that's a good thing that happened from COVID. So COVID, I don't want another COVID, and I'm ready for it to be done with.
Oh, please let it be done with.
I'm tired of the COVID. I want it to go away. And I know I said the COVID. It was ironically, it was not like, you know. But, I mean, if you look, you can find good that has come out of bad. Mm-hmm. If you look, some of my friends and I would call that looking for lovelies. And if you look, you can find good.
Yeah.
But you got to look.
Unfortunately, not sure exactly what good came out of this one. I mean, it is a story that I think it could have caused people to take a step back and look at a system that was very broken, to be more susceptible to accepting change.
Hopefully that did happen.
Right. But I mean, this story was very difficult to find, and which is aggravating because
why aren't we telling these stories?
Why are we not telling people what happened? And it's, and you can't erase things like this.
Right. And, you know, you could tell this story in high school with an abbreviated description. An abbreviated description. Mm-hmm. But these stories need to be told. I mean, we know, I'm an avid reader, and in high school I was, you know, I've always been a big reader, and I love period books, pieces. And so, I mean, I was aware of such things because of the kinds of things that I read. Mm-hmm. Not everybody reads like that. And so they weren't aware. I mean, I remember we were reading something in my senior year in English, and we were talking about taking your Saturday night bath, you know, because you took a bath once a week to get ready, and the kids didn't know what they were talking about, but, you know, you were taking your bath for church, and they didn't realize that, you know, they talk about, the phrase, throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they didn't know what that meant. And, you know, I explained that,
baby was the last one to get bathed,
Yeah.
and that bathwater is real dark.
right, especially when you had 9 kids and, the dad would go first.
I'm sorry.
Too many. I know.
Too many children
I
is
know.
what you mean.
Well,
Too many.
But, and people didn't realize that was the case and what you did. And then once it got explained, they were like, oh, that's disgusting. And we're like, well, that's what you did. I mean, you had to fill it up from the well or wherever. So, I mean, I knew that, but everybody didn't know that. So if you didn't know that, now you know.
If you don't know,
now
you know, Mr. President.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Which is, I guess this will segue us into the end of the episode. But what's funny is when we read these stories and it's Thomas Jefferson, I only think of David Diggs. So I imagine him being sassy,
in his purple suit.
Yeah, like writing that letter back, being like, I'm so sorry that you are not able to get a job, but I will not be the one assisting you in this endeavor.
Sucks to be you.
Signed, David Diggs. That's all I can think of. Anytime we talk about like Thomas Jefferson, I'm like, it's David. And
such a blunder sometimes makes me wonder why I even bring the thunder.
Why he even bring the thunder?
So many good lines.
God, that guys, we know that pretty much in every episode we've had a reference to Hamilton, but really,
anytime we talk, we pretty much speak in Hamilton lyrics.
It's just, oh God. I mean, the whole podcast got started because of a Hamilton song. So, we have that to thank for being here. So, sorry.
Not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry for the Hamilton references. Sorry to start your week out with this, but but people need to know. And you can just think of the Year of Miracles and
not a Year of Miracles. We need to rename that.
Think about the millions of squirrels and billions of birds. Just imagine the raft of squirrels with the passenger pigeons just perched on top. Just like, and the pigeons are
Mine.
Yeah. The pigeons are like, man, these squirrels have been sleeping forever. Bob, do you see this? Do you see what's happening?
That one's sleeping face down. How's he doing that?
I didn't know that squirrels could breathe underwater. Dude, you know that squirrels could breathe underwater?
Man, this one's fat.
Yeah, that one's big. His little legs and feet, though, don't look that big. I wonder how that happens.
Oh. Wait, you smell something?
They don't breathe either when they're underwater. It's odd.
Dude, you got something funky going on.
I mean, it's just like, God, that's... I mean...
Kicking up a funk over there.
That millions of squirrels in a migration is just...
Oh, my...
Oh, gosh, that's all I can think. And then imagine, so like, for anybody who doesn't know, and sorry, guys, I know this episode's really long, but a group of crows is called a murder. And all I can think of is like, if pigeons were called that, just like a murder of pigeons, billions of pigeons flying towards you. Which these poor pigeons, they're gone now. They're dead. No more. Oh goodness. So yeah, that's our story for this week, guys. What?
A group of pigeons. One of the options is a dropping of pigeons.
Okay.
A passel of pigeons.
A passel,
which
of pigeons.
I love. A plague of pigeons. Boom.
That would be it. You look up and a plague of pigeons is flying straight towards you. The world is ending. It would end.
I mean,
it would end.
One of my friends does not do. Two of my friends do not do birds.
Right.
Their world would end. Like they would.
I
they
wonder
would be gone.
if like heart attack rates went up that year, because some
panic attacks. I'm sure did.
Some farmer was out there and he just sees this plague of pigeons and he just dies.
I'm telling you right now, I have one friend who she would have a panic attack. And she has asthma, so she would have a panic attack and an asthma attack at the same time. I know
billions of pigeons. Billions.
She would panic attack her way into an asthma attack.
Oh, God. Mm-hmm. So, we have a website where you can find all ONUC information you're looking for. Real simple. Just go to onenationundercrime.com. We are One Nation Under Crime on Facebook and Instagram, and at ONUC Pod on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, surprisingly. I'm on that Twitter a good bit. So,
did you say on that Twitter?
On that Twitter. I'm saying like on that account. Like I'm on that account.
She's a tweeting fool on that Twitter.
So if you love our podcast as much as we do, follow us on your favorite podcatcher. Recommend us to everyone, literally everyone. Please, please, please recommend us to people. And leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcatcher while you are at it. Also, y'all have stuck around this long. So if you have stuck around this long,
thank you.
We now have stickers.
Stickers!
And if you review our podcast, if you leave a review somewhere, if you take a screenshot of it and message it to our Twitter, to our Instagram, to our email, and you send me your address, you will receive a free sticker.
Woohoo! Who doesn't love a free sticker?
Right. And they're pretty cool. They're waterproof, dishwasher proof, fade proof. Pretty cool. You can put them on anything.
I get a sticker today.
Yes. So, yes, if you would do that, that would be great.
Yes.
We do have a Patreon. If you want to help out in that way, you can. And thanks for sticking around this long. If you stuck around this long and you have a complaint about our podcast, why did you stick around this long? We don't want you to review the podcast.
No.
If it's a 5-star review, then you will get a sticker. And I don't know, maybe
if it's not a 5-star review, no sticker for you.
No sticker. Right. So, and always please do leave a comment with those because it does show up better. So thanks for listening to us this week.
Yep.
We will see you here same time,
different crime
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all. Goodbye.
Bye.
You're welcome.